This was way more challenging than I thought. Let me show you why. Hey, what's up? I'm Fitz. I had so much fun making the grappler from Batman the Animated Series, but I felt like it needed to be displayed much better. I was literally dumping it on the top of that cabinet and it just wasn't cutting it, bro. I went online looking for a display holder and I did find one, but this is holding nothing. So I had no other choice. I have to make my own. I started thinking about how I wanted the grappler displayed, and I knew I wanted these three things. I wanted a small storage container for the grappler's ammo, a similar U-shaped arm for the holder, and I also wanted a really cool paint job to help it stand out. To really save some time, I started by looking for some STL files for the Batman logo. I landed on MakerWorld and I found Design Slice Print Studios had a free STL file of the new 2025 Batman logo, and I thought, you know what? I'm gonna use this, but I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I think I can make it look better. Next, I planned out the overall shape in what I wanted it to look like, and I started playing around in Tinkercad. I used a round square shape for the base plate, and I added a octagonal pillar in the middle for the U-shaped holder. Next up was the storage of the ammo. I knew that I didn't want this to be front and center. I wanted it to seem like it was hidden, and this is how I did it. Right behind the Batman logo, I used two open front boxes, and this is the perfect style to slot in that ammo, and because it's behind the Batman logo, you can hardly see it. Last little test I did before the full print was I printed just this U-clip part. I really wanted to make sure that it was the right size. It's also the last part of the print before you get to the end of the job. I didn't want to waste any filament, but I also want to make sure this looks really cool. Once the print was done, I knew that the painting was really where I wanted it to stand out. To achieve the comic book style paint job I was going for, I was influenced a lot by a street artist by the name of Joshua Vides. To me, he's one of the first people I saw use this outline line work style. It looks like it's come straight out of a sketchbook, but I also wanted to change the color scheme so that it was away from the original logo color, but also was clearly inspired by comic book coloring. Now for the paint, I used three main colors of Posca paint pens. The first is a straight black. This is a PC 8K size, so it's actually a really large nib. I also used the same size with this gray. There's no real name for this gray, but it's almost like a slate gray. And this is actually really similar in color to the gray PLA filament I used for the print. I started off with the coloring by working on the logo with the black backdrop. I knew that I was going to go over a lot of other areas, but this was going to have a lot more nooks and crannies I had to get into. I used the paint pen to get into the bulk of the Batman logo, but there was some small areas that I couldn't get into. What I did was I used my paint mat and I stippled it onto the mat and then used a paintbrush, a fine tip paintbrush, to then get into the little nooks and crannies. The next, I went over the front of the Batman text, and I did that with the gray. This took a couple of layers to get over. I think it took about 2 or 3 layers. I just literally wanted the very front of the text to be gray because the sides of the 3D effect was all painted black, and I really wanted it to be solid black in those areas. To achieve the highlight tones I was going for, I used this light blue. This size is PC5M. It's a bullet tip, but it's much smaller. It just enabled me to get across the very edge of the text using that highlight effect I was going for. And man, I'm so happy with how it came out. To achieve the sketchbook style, I used a mixture of a paintbrush and also the pen itself. I used the pen around the edges just to give that outline effect. And for these really small line work details that you can see around the edges, I again just went back to stippling on the paint mat and then use the fine paintbrush to get in and really work on, you know, the style I was going for. Now, one little happy accident that I did have is I was originally on this column. You can see, hopefully, that there's like a little bit of splotching and stuff like that. Now, I think that actually looks really great because it gives it almost like a concrete look. I originally was trying to do line work on the edges of the shape, but I didn't like how it looked. It looked way too thick and clunky. So then I used some acetone and I brushed it, and it started to dissolve it, but it also like bled the paint out. And I thought, oh wow, I could just actually use that to sort of create like very similar effects that I get from dry brushing, where I could leak the darker tones out and it would allow the edging to show, but without it being as hard and harsh. And I'm really happy with how that happened. Really awesome, happy accident. Now, there's something I need to admit. This came out really, really good, but it was actually the third attempt in trying to make this happen. Let me show you the mistakes I made so you don't make them yourself. This right here is the first print. The first issue I had was I selected the wrong support style. I didn't use the tree, I used the other blocky style, and it actually created like a lot more stringing and this like spaghetti stringing on some of the edges. It was also really brutal to get off. The first major issue I had was a broken support in this corner. Now, you can kind of see there, I got some layer shifting. I didn't want this to go to waste, so I actually used this as a proof of concept for the paint. I knew I needed to fix that support issue. The next one I did, well, I thought, you know what? Let's go with tree supports and let's see how it works. And you know what? Didn't work. The support broke in the bottom. Because the support's not there, it's basically extruding into nothing, and then that's what happens. But I actually ended up identifying another issue that I had. This wall right here is thicker than this wall. In Tinkercad, I used the empty boxes to create those voids, and it was just one like little pixel over, and it threw it off. So I knew I had to fix it. I just went in, adjusted it, and then made sure that that was all sorted. Now for the third print, brother, I wasn't taking any chances. I went to a stronger tree support. Did mean that there was a little bit more filament used. It was also a little bit harder to take the supports off, but the outcome meant that I didn't have any issues. You can see right here, look, no issues. Came out perfect. Now, I did have some stepping. You can actually see right there. I did actually just sand it to really buff it out, and so it's far less noticeable. But listen, you want to see how it looks? Let me show you, bro. That right there is the end result. How wicked does this look? We've got the little space in the back that I can just slot in the ammo, out of sight, out of mind. It's perfectly hid right behind the logo, so it barely stands out. Right, that looks wicked. I'd love to know from you guys out there, what do you think of the color scheme that I went with? Do you think I should have done the original blue and white logo color, or do you think this one looks better? Jump in the comments and let me know. Now, the overall print time for the holder was a little under 6.5 hours. If you want the file for yourself, it's completely free. Go ahead, check out the links in the description and get it for yourself. That right there is gonna do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and until I see you next time, make sure you're looking after yourself, you take care, and be safe. All right, peace.